Bhante,
Mm-hmm.
Budaya.
No, Buddha.
Um, I have question for consciousness. Can you please explain more about this consciousness? Like, what is the meaning of because consciousness, I'm not me, like this is not myself, this is not mine. So
Mm-hmm.
how like, because what I know is consciousness is our like a way of tell wrong, right from wrong, things like that, you know, our consciousness, like if I do something wrong, my consciousness will tell me that this is wrong. I cannot do this wrong thing. So can you please explain more about this?
Yeah. Okay, Sally. It's clear. Um, so some confusions happen because of the misinterpretations given to these words in the ordinary society. For example, if somebody said that consciousness defines good and bad, or consciousness distinguishes between good and bad, then of course you get confused when again you hear that consciousness needs to be understood, consciousness is impermanent, is subject to cessation. Of course, you get confused because in the first place, you were taught a misinterpretation. It is not the consciousness that distinguishes between good and bad. It is wisdom. Wisdom distinguishes between good and bad. Mindfulness, awareness, these are the qualities that are doing that. Consciousness, as Buddha explains, Kathamach bhikkhave vijnana. O monks, what is the consciousness? Vijanati tiko bhikkhave tasma vijnanante uchati. Consciousness task is just bare knowing. Knowing the visual object is called eye consciousness, chakku vijnana. Knowing the sound is called ear consciousness, sota vijnana. Knowing the odor or smell is ghana vijnana, nose consciousness. Knowing the taste is the tongue consciousness. Knowing the tangible is the body consciousness. And knowing the thought is mind consciousness. It's just bare knowing. It doesn't have any ability to distinguish um, good and bad. It's just knowing, it's just cognizing the object. And that is the difference between a dead body and a person who is living. The consciousness of the dead body is released from the body, and all the six senses function with the help of the consciousness. And even though we have eyes and there are visual objects out there, if the consciousness hasn't arisen, we won't recognize that visual object. For example, when we drive, when we are in a vehicle, we pass so many stores, malls and places, shops, right?
Attention.
And somebody, and we were looking for some shop, but we were thinking something else while driving. And some of our kids or somebody else who was in the vehicle would say, oh, why did you pass that shop or mall? We already passed that. And we are, oh, did we pass it? Yeah, didn't you see that? Then they ask, we had our eyes and the mall was already there or the shop was there, but we didn't see. Why? There wasn't the consciousness, eye consciousness at that time in connection with that visual object. So that is the knowing of an object. Okay, Sally? So Buddha teaches Buddha teaches this consciousness is not a permanent thing. For example, you look at one direction and the consciousness arises with the help of with the union of the eye and this visual object, the consciousness arises. And you change the direction and you look somewhere else. And that consciousness arose in a second ago, already changed. And that's called the impermanence of consciousness. And you were reading a book and your consciousness arises from word to word. Okay, that's how you recognize this. And then suddenly you started thinking something, and that time the eye consciousness changed and the mind consciousness arose. And then you have passed few pages and you don't know what was in the book. And then you go back again, right? And you start reading. See how impermanent this consciousness is? It jumps from one sense to another very quickly. It's because of the impermanence of the consciousness. Why is it impermanent? It's not because we intentionally change this from one sense to other or one object to other. It's not we doing it. It's the combination of impermanent causes and conditions that do it. What is the causes and conditions behind the impermanence of consciousness? It's not a powerful creature or creator God or an external person who does this. It's not even by ourselves. You know, if we are thinking about some happy things, we never want to change it to thinking about bad things, sad things. Do you like to change? No, nobody wants to change the mind to think about sad things. Nobody wants. Why? But why can't we people control that? Why they are thinking eventually go to stress levels and depression levels? Now you understand it's out of control. Consciousness is handled by not by us, not by a creator God or an external being. The consciousness totally depends on impermanent causes and conditions. And what is that impermanent cause? That is called nama rupa, mentality and materiality. If you investigate the true nature of mentality and materiality, you will understand why consciousness is impermanent. For example, a table is made up of wood. Why is that table impermanent? Because the wood is impermanent. If you take a glass, why is that glass impermanent? Because the material which is used to make it impermanent. In the same way, consciousness is a production of impermanent causes, nama rupa. For that, you need to understand the nama rupa. Rupa you already know. Rupa means 4 elements or anything made of 4 elements. Okay, so when we know something, when you cognize an object, always there is this cognition of elements, 4 elements, and that object is definitely an object made of earth element, water element, fire element, and air element. So behind the consciousness, that recognition is there. With no matter whether it is eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness, there is that recognition of 4 elements there. So in order for consciousness to arise, there should be that recognition of 4 elements. Okay, that is Rupa. Nama means, so in some Dhamma books, when people or monks or some nuns, when they write, this has been misinterpreted. That's why it's very hard for people to attain stages of enlightenment. They interpret Nama Rupa as Rupa means the body, Nama means the mind. Buddha never described Nama Rupa like that. You understand? Some people describe Nama Rupa means the body, Nama means the mind. If somebody learns that and tries to investigate the consciousness, they will never understand what consciousness is. Because that's not what Buddha taught, what Buddha realized, but what Buddha discovered and taught. That is a personal idea. And some people describe Nama Rupa as this. Rupa means the form group that we did during the meditation. Nama means the other 4 groups of the 5 clinging groups. What are the other 4 groups? Vedana, Sanya, Chetana or Sankhara, and Vijnana. Right? And they put those 4 groups of clinging as the Nama, and the form they put as the Rupa. So they divide 5 groups of clinging, Pancha Upadana Khandha, into 2 parts. And they say this is Nama Rupa. That is wrong. Because the consciousness is already in there, according to their explanation. That is not the explanation of the Buddha. Buddha explains Nama Rupa. Rupa means form or anything made up of 4 elements. Nama means 5 things, not 4 things. Not the 4 things of the 5 groups of clinging. Nama means 5 things. Remember this very carefully. Nama means 5 things. What are they? The mentality. Mentality means a name for 5 things. Vedana, that is feeling. Perception, sanya. Chetana, thoughts. Phassa, contact. Manasikara, attention. These 5 things are called Nama. So when a consciousness arises with regard to the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, these 5 things plus Rupa, mentality and materiality, are in the background of that consciousness. These Nama Rupa give rise to the consciousness. What is the nature of the Nama Rupa? What is the nature of the Rupa? 4 elements? Impermanent. What is the nature of the 5 things described as the mentality? Attention for that object? Impermanent, because while you are reading this book, you change your attention to something else. Attention changed. That change of the attention, didn't that change of the attention affect your consciousness? Because the eye consciousness was there while you were reading, and suddenly you change attention to something else. And now different consciousness arose. So the attention that is in one of the 5 factors of the mentality completely supports the change of the consciousness. So the 5 things described as mentality: attention is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception is impermanent, volition or thoughts are impermanent, and the contact is impermanent. all the 5 things described as nama by the Buddha are impermanent. So these 5 things plus rupa, nama rupa, are impermanent things. So if these impermanent cause gives rise to the consciousness, what is the nature of the consciousness? Permanent or impermanent? Impermanent. When nama rupa changes, always consciousness changes. We can't hold on to consciousness. We can't see only happy things because consciousness changes. It doesn't work according to our will. If consciousness is permanent and self, if it was self, we will use it to cognize only the happy visual objects. If the consciousness was self, we will use our ear consciousness only to hear pleasant sounds. So the people who insult us, criticize us, we don't hear because we take control over consciousness. And the cause of suffering is that we don't understand this and we cling to this consciousness as mine, I am, and myself. And that's the arising of suffering. If the consciousness was self, we will smell only the nice smells. If the consciousness was self, we will only taste the delicious tastes. Then there won't be any fights in homes between husbands and wives for the curries and food. If the consciousness was self, we will always feel the comfortable touches and tangibles. If the consciousness was self, we will only have happy thoughts in the mind because we control the mind consciousness. No, we don't have control because the consciousness completely depends on the mentality and materiality. When mentality, materiality change, consciousness changes. This is the thing we need to understand.
Bhante, I have a
Yes.
question.
Mhm.
Bhante, how does karmic formations play a role in this? Can you explain?
That falls under the sankhara. That's one of the 5 factors of the nama rupa. So what are those 5 factors again in the nama rupa? Vedana, sanya, chetana. Chetana is the karma. So behind our consciousness, there is karma background. That is why when one person sees somebody, that person becomes the best friend of that person. And when the same person is seen by another person, he's the enemy. He doesn't like to see that person. And there are some tastes. For some people, those tastes are the most delicious tastes. And some people hate the same tastes. Okay? So definitely there is a karma background behind consciousness because there is that karma background in the nama rupa. That is chetana. Chetana is always referred to karma. Chetanaham bhikkhave kammang vadami. Oh monks, I say chetana is karma.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. So that is why we have when consciousness arises with regard to eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, it is different, always different.
Bhante, about your observation about kids asking high quality questions, do you think that's related to the, and maybe I'm connecting too much, but a difference in consciousness. And my second question is, did the Buddha ever teach kids?
Answer for the second question, yes, Buddha taught a lot to kids. And he had arahants of age 7. Not only he taught the kids, but also he had arahants, enlightened monks of age 7. So we can understand how much he taught the kids. If they were able to become enlightened at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, right?
Are there suttas, Bhante, related
Yeah,
to him teaching kids? Yes.
yes, there are suttas. If you go to Itivuttaka, just one sutta came to my mind while Buddha was going somewhere on the roadside. He saw a group of kids fishing in the river, and Buddha asked them to come, and the boys came, and the Buddha asked, "Dear sons, do you like happiness?" "We do, Bhante, we like happiness." They say, "Samana, yes, monk, we like happiness." "Okay, do you know that fish also like happiness like you?" They answered, "Yes." "Okay, this is not the way to gain happiness, even though you like happiness. By destroying others' happiness, you can never gain happiness. If you like happiness, you have to avoid killing. The way you like your life, all beings like their lives." And they worshiped the Buddha, gave up fishing that day forever. So that is one sutta taught for the little ones. And there is another sutta that day when Buddha was going somewhere. Buddha saw a group of boys hitting a snake. And that day also Buddha taught the Dhamma to those kids. And also
An observation about the difference in consciousness between children and adults.
yeah, the first question. The reason for the wisdom is basically not the consciousness. It is good karma coming from past lives. For example, the enlightened monks who become at the age of 7, they are born with a huge karma, good karma of past lives. They have practiced Dhamma in past lives. They were monks under the previous Buddhas. So is the wisdom. And Buddha taught one day, what should be done with consciousness? What should be done with wisdom? What is the answer?
Consciousness should be understood and wisdom should be cultivated and developed.
That is the right answer. The Buddha gave the same answer. Consciousness must be understood. Consciousness can never be developed. It's just a bare knowing. Consciousness should be understood. Understood the impermanence of consciousness, understood its arising, its passing away, because consciousness is part of the suffering, noble truth of suffering. Remember Sankittena Panchupadana Khandha Dukkha, in brief, 5 groups of clinging are suffering. So out of these 5 groups, consciousness is the 5th one. The noble truth of suffering should be understood. So the consciousness should be understood. It can never be developed. But the wisdom, panya is the Pali word for wisdom, it should be developed. It should be developed to see the true nature of consciousness. So these are different roles of each thing.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Swaminathan sir,
Mm-hmm.
Namo Buddhaya Swaminathan sir.
Yes, go ahead.
About the question we were talking about Nama Rupa,
Mm-hmm.
and Swaminathan sir, the Nama part, we were talking about Vedana, Sanna, Chetana, Passamanasikara. Swaminathan sir, that Nama Rupa is on the dependent origination, right, Swaminathan sir? In the
It's in the dependent origination.
in the
Same thing, and it is the also in the 5 groups of clinging as the cause of consciousness. Same.
Yes, Swaminathan sir.
The definition is the same.
Definition is the same. Swaminathan sir, when it comes to the first noble truth, at that point we have the Panch Upadanaskandha, which is the noble truth of suffering. Is that right, Swaminathan?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Swaminathan, so my question is like, for the dependent origination is explaining the cause of suffering. So that's the reason why we have the Vedana, Sanna, Chetana, Passamanasikara.
Yes, Namarupa is also part of the noble truth of suffering. Consciousness is also a part of the noble truth of suffering. Namarupa also should be understood. Consciousness also should be understood, because they all included in the noble truth of suffering.
Yes, Swaminathan. Swaminathan, if you have some time, avidya pacha sankhara, in that, if there are also now the second factor based off avidya.
Yeah. So we can learn about that later. Right now we are talking about Namarupa and Vijnana, okay?
Okay, Swaminathan.
We can discuss suttas about dependent origination. We can learn about each link, okay? Yes, so we need to learn dependent origination repeatedly. There are amazing suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya. So yes. Okay, so
question.
Okay.
Connected to the previous discussion, I had another question. I don't know how good I will be able to ask this question from you.
Okay.
So we were talking about the changing consciousness. The consciousness is changing every moment. So I mean, now you recognize something, say any item made out of 4 great elements is also recognized. You say you saw something. Now, so I mean, that consciousness is, that's once, in the next moment, you have a new consciousness appearing. So I mean, based on the Dhamma, we understand when these factors coming together, the seeing process took place. Again, so I mean, some other consciousness comes, and this previous experience is it's lost. So I mean, now do we consider?
But even though the consciousness, the previous consciousness disappear, the problem here is that beings have craving for the consciousness that existed in the past.
Yes,
beings have craving for the consciousness that is going to exist in the future. Like that, the craving is linked here for each consciousness. That is why in the Vipassana meditation about khandhas, the consciousness needs to be understood as impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself, whether it is interior, exterior, superior, inferior, gross or subtle, far or near. That is the range of the existence of the consciousness, and that needs to be understood as impermanent and not mine, not I am, not myself, because the craving is linked there. So the problem is not the disappearance of the consciousness from time to time, or the arising of a new consciousness from, in one sense, and the other sense. That's not the problem. Problem is that we have craving for each consciousness. That is the problem.
Yes, Swaminathan, sir. So that gave actually two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Swaminathan, so that the previous consciousness is it's gone. Swaminathan, do we consider that whatever the object that you saw is still there? Like Swaminathan, it's the nature of
No, that
mind.
object is a part of the impermanent world. The person you saw 5 minutes ago has changed because
Yes.
it's a form. It's a rupa made of 4 elements. It changes every time. The person you saw 5 minutes ago already changed. Buddha says rupa rupatiti rupam. Why Buddha calls them rupa? Is because they are subject to destruction. That is just the meaning of the rupa. Rupa means subject to destruction. So the person you saw 5 minutes ago, and Buddha says rupatiti from what? Subject to destruction from what? Destruction from subject to destruction from hunger, from thirst, from heat, from cold. See how wise the Buddha is?
Yes, Swaminathan, it does not mean that consciousness, our individual consciousness change means we don't consider that particular group as
Consciousness always depends on the 2 things. Dvayam bhikkave sambhavasa viññānasa upado hoti. That means depends on 2 things consciousness arises. What are the 2 things? Eye and the object. Ear and the sound.
Yes, Swaminathan.
So when consciousness arises dependent on two things, what is the nature of those 2 things? Always impermanent. So the consciousness is impermanent.
Yes, Swaminathan. So a person who doesn't know anything about the Dhamma will, like when they see something, they will think it is a permanent object, right?
That's
Swaminathan?
the problem. That's the problem.
That because the mind, the memory gets updated. So you think, okay, that item is still there.
Yeah,
But
even though he doesn't know the Dhamma, he has craving. So craving is the problem.
So I mean, as a result, only the mind consciousness comes. Like
Yeah, mind consciousness comes because as a memory of that object. You see it and it changes, consciousness changes, object changes, you go somewhere else, but then you think about it later. You recollect that, and at that time is the mind, thought, and the mind consciousness.
Yes, that it just comes to the memory because of avidya and
yeah, it's a part of the dependent origination. Yeah,
okay.
Everything is there: craving, clinging, arranging of karma, tanha, upadana, bhava, everything is there. So the moment we pass away here, we are going to be reborn.
Yes,
There is not even a single gap between the death and the rebirth because of this dependent origination. So if you think you die here and you are going to fly in the sky for 7 days and looking for a better rebirth, that's not going to happen. If you can find the better world to go after 7 days, then there is no point of practicing the Dhamma, because then everybody can select the place where they like to be, right? That's not how consciousness works.
Yes,
As soon as so Buddha teaches this life lasts with 3 supporting things. Ayu, that means lifespan. Heat, usma. Vijnana, consciousness. These are the 3 things that make us alive. lifespan, heat of the body, and the consciousness. Buddha teaches when these three things are released from a body, lifespan is ended, heat is gone. You know, the dead body becomes very cold very quickly. Heat is gone. Consciousness is released. Buddha teaches that body is like a log thrown away in the woods. See how wise the Buddha? That's why when Buddha was asked, Bhante, if I am in the middle of some problems and my mind is confused and it is not well focused on the Dhamma, at that time, if my lifespan is over, that means if at that time, if I die, I'm afraid what will be my future rebirth? Will I be reborn in a happy place? And Buddha answered, Mahanama, Sakyan, king, Buddha answered, don't be afraid, Mahanama. Don't be afraid. You have been practicing noble qualities for a long, long time. You have been practicing confidence, precepts, Dhamma knowledge, generosity, and wisdom. No matter where you die, how you die, your body will be thrown away or animals will eat it. It doesn't matter. But your mind will attain higher stages. You will have a better rebirth. But in the ordinary world, people don't care mind. They care about the body. They care about the dead body, how to decorate it, who to invite for the funeral, how much we should pay for the box. What do you call the box? That we put the dead body in?
Coffin.
Coffin.
Coffin. And how it should be decorated, what should be the materials made of. See the ignorance of the ordinary world. They don't care what is happening inside the mind while living. It is full of negative qualities: anger, hatred, jealousy, arrogance, conceit, greediness. It's full of these things. They don't want to clean it. But the body, high priority. But in the enlightened one's world, Buddha says, once these three things are released from the body, lifespan, heat, and the consciousness, it is like a log thrown away in the woods. Creatures can eat it. People can burn it. People can bury it. Doesn't matter. That's why Bhantes don't like to go for funerals. There is no any mention in the suttas that Buddha went for funerals and did any rites or rituals for a dead body. But anyhow, it changed over time in traditions. Now people don't care what they are doing while living, but they want monks definitely to participate in the funeral. That's why we ask people, if you are sick, if your parents are sick, if your family members are sick, please call us. Please let us know. We will come anytime. In the early morning, midnight, we will come to that hospital. we will come to your house. We want to help that person before death.
Before that, yes, Swami.
And you don't need to invite us for funeral. We are not going to get angry at you. We are not going to be sad if you don't invite for funeral. What is most important thing is that the Dhamma we share with the person when he is alive. Then we can teach that person, okay, think about the good things you have done, the ways that you helped others, you know, the good things. Practice meditation, and we encourage that person. We like to do that all the time. But when people invite for funerals, we feel sad. Why?
Cannot do anything, right, Swami?
We cannot do anything. It's gone. But unfortunately, now if we don't participate in funerals, people get angry. And they stop coming to the temples. That's the truth.
The truth, yeah. That exists.
And you know, when my teacher stopped going to funerals, so before he started this organization, Mahameunawa, he was a temple monk. He lived in temples. And people always invite for funerals. And my teacher, Lokuswaminanse, went to a funeral one day. And Lokuswaminanse felt this stinky smell of alcohol. And Lokuswaminanse says, everybody was drunk in the funeral except the dead body. That's the nature of funerals. So the monks go to the funeral and teach the Dhamma for all those people who are drunk and don't have any mindfulness. And they still want to teach the Dhamma to the dead body. That's why they invite. And then Lokuswaminanse realized this is a meaningless thing. And after Lokuswaminanse started this organization, Lokuswaminanse emphasized again and again the importance of teaching the Dhamma to somebody when that person is alive, before dying. And many people understood that after my teacher taught that, and many people understood, and they actually started to think about it. That's a very good thing. Okay, where did we start and where did we stop? We started from consciousness and we ended with death.
Bante, I have a question, Bante.
Okay.
Can we, as practitioners of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, can we not prepare our mind in advance for this event of death that we're all going to face sooner or later? If we can prepare our mind, then when the moment of death arises, we can take our mind willfully there through the consciousness with mindfulness, right? To cut through so we know and we can kind of prepare ourselves. Instead of like, if you think of a play, instead of practicing for our role, if you go without that practice, you know, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks, like for a person who is not awakened to the Dhamma. But since we have the opportunity to study the Dhamma and learn it and analyze it with noble wisdom, if we practice that in our mind, in meditation, with wisdom, that, okay, the moment of death is going to come. So let's prepare ourselves when we get to that moment, how we can act wisely and use panya to end this suffering, or at least to have a better rebirth as taught by the Buddha.
Yeah, so that's called Marana Sati. Marana Sati
Yes.
means Buddha teaches during the day, every day,
Mhm.
you need to think frequently that the next moment I may die. There are so many causes and conditions for my death. Okay, maybe corona, maybe due to corona, due to some accidents, or due to some other diseases, due to the attacks of non-humans, due to the attacks of non-humans, like that. Buddha asks us to think. Since that is the case, this life is so fragile, the death may come to me at any time. I should not think these evil thoughts, because if death comes next moment, I will die with those evil thoughts, and that's not good for my rebirth. So that is the mindfulness of death. Now you understand what happens to that person who frequently practices that mindfulness of death. So he always cleanses the mind. He doesn't want to have anger, irritation, greediness, conceit, all these negative thoughts. He doesn't want to keep even for a 1 hour, let alone a week, month, or years. And he doesn't have to spend time by quarreling with others, fighting with others, insulting others. Buddha teaches, if people know that they are going to die one day, these quarrels, fights will subdue. Because people don't think that they are going to die one day, these quarrels won't come to an end. Buddha taught in the Dhammapada. So recently one father, and he talked to me over the phone, and he had this big problem of hatred, anger with and he told me, Bhante, I can't believe that this anger is so strong sometimes in my mind. What should I do? Like, I'm so afraid, and how to get rid of this anger, and I don't like it. And then I asked him, do you do practice mindfulness of death? At that time when you are angry, hatred has overcome you, do you practice mindfulness of death? Practice it. Think that if I am going to die next moment, due to a heart attack or due to some other problem, and I am going to die with this hatred, full of hatred, I'll be born as a snake, as a tiger, as a lion. We don't practice the mindfulness of death. So that's why we keep all these negative things for hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months, years and years, lives and lives. Okay? Practicing mindfulness of death is a powerful tool to cleanse the mind, to be a kind, nice person to the society, to the family, and you will be very generous. You will help others. You will do lots of volunteering. And that's a powerful bridge to be a nice person. Because nice person means always a person with good qualities in the mind. If you want to really be a nice person, generous person, a person who helps others and who thinks about others' happiness, because if you get angry, you don't think about others' well-being. Buddha says, Kuddo attang na janati, kuddo attang na passati. An angry person doesn't know his own well-being. He doesn't know the well-being of others. So if you really want to be a very good father, very good mother, a good husband, a good wife, a good person, you need a clear mind, clean mind, purified mind. To do that, the meditation of mindfulness of death really helps.
Thank you, Bhante.
And if you like to learn more about the mindfulness of death, instructions of the Buddha, please go to Numerical Discourses and read the Marana Sati. If you type just Marana Sati, or if you Google, you will see the sutta. There are two suttas, Marana Sati Sutta 1, Marana Sati Sutta 2. And there Buddha teaches how to practice that mindfulness, okay?